Luna, who's now at the University of Kansas, associate professor, doing wonderfully well. All right, so we all know that these, what are sometimes called little words, modal particles, are super tricky, right? And in English, there's not really a direct translation, which is one of the issues, but well, you know, like, kinda, so, like mitigators, etc. And modal particles, these uninflected small words, actually help to express the position of the speaker vis-a-vis the knowledge or the issue or what have you. And so it's a real problem to not be able to use these well. However, the problems also include rampant polysemy, right? Meaning there are related semantic values and functional values to these terms. They're very context-bound, right? Classrooms are not particle-friendly environments because there's always a hierarchical imbalance between the teacher, the expert speaker, and the student, right? And in textbooks, the treatment is formal and not particularly helpful. So here's what Nina Vyakina did. She was working within an online intercultural exchange framework. She looked at these modal particles, Yadin, Mal, and Awa, and she actually had her students engaging with German students in Germany via a variety of internet communication tools, asynchronous and synchronous text chat. And then she developed interventions based on the actual exchanges that her students were participating in and contributing to. So here's just, I'll just go through these quickly. This is published work, but I think it's such a great example, right? So awareness raising exercise 1, visibilizing linguistic assets, as you will see when I get to the data analysis, that had not been used by the Americans at all, right? And she said, in this excerpt from our chat with our German partners, this is actual interaction that you participated in, you, the students in this class, right? So look at these words, you know, ja, mal, aber, etc. And she also says, have you ever used these before? And she gives some examples from their discourse, right? That you can see in the lower part here. She has another activity where she produces a concordance, right? Where she centers mal, the modal particle, and asks what is the linguistic environment of this modal particle, right? Looking at finite verbs and you know, what's happening? What are these sentences doing? What social actions are these sentences doing? Declaratives, exclamatives, commands, questions, etc. So that was her intervention. So look at this. The first pre-intervention, right? Americans are using absolutely none of these, right? And the Germans are using quite a few. In chat, so email, and in chat, you see in the post-intervention period, which is the one on the right here, right? You see that the Americans are using quite a few more modal particles, right? And I love her analysis here. So this is a dispersion graph, right? So you can see the Americans used virtually no modal particles at the beginning. And then they did after the intervention or during the intervention, right? What else do you see here? What do you see in this? So what does that say about the nature of relationship development, right? So as the Americans figure out how to use modal particles better, which creates a more socially convivial environment, then the Germans also reciprocate and mirror that, right? In ways that build a greater sense of rapport, a greater sense of sharedness. We all know from the interaction literature, right, that lexical mirroring, for example, has a profound effect on whether people think you agree with them or are aligned with them, or if you're not, right? And you also probably want to know, are they getting it right? And they were for the most part. So learners, the accurate use, 27 versus 3. In the first and then the next was 22 correct, and only one was an obvious incorrect use of this modal particle. So this is a really cool little study that helps address a difficult to teach area, in this case modal particles in German, not addressed well in classroom context because of the power difference between the instructor and the students, right? And allows them to actually build greater rapport, which is the whole point of online intercultural exchange anyway, right? Is language learning and language use in the context of developing and maintaining a social relationship of significance. So this idea of you know, DDL, like having them do the work of figuring out what the patterns are, Safran et al., there's a bunch of work on pattern recognition in the SLA literature, which some of you may be familiar with. But this DDL in close affinity with other kinds of pedagogical approaches, which many of you probably use, like focused instruction, for example, or input enhancement, if you're a Bill Van Putnite. or salience cues, right? Concept-based approaches if you're a Vygotskian, right? Systemic functional approaches if you're coming from the Sydney School. And this idea of living language, authentically engaging in interaction with age peers, but also pedagogically mediated, right, in ways that allow for a mediated kind of authenticity and increase radically the learning outcomes in this difficult to teach area. All right, we'll be quick. I know we're kind of getting long on the tooth. But I decided to put this in because I was at a number of talks that actually focused on virtual exchange. And so I published this. It's available, so I can go through it pretty quickly. This, by the way, is revenge. So I didn't get funded, and I put all that work into the proposal, and I was like, dang it. So I just published it as an article, or a book chapter, actually. Anyway, because it was so close. 300 grand, too, US, so whatever that is, like 5 euros or something. So the idea here is pretty basic. Language, particularly linguistic assets, are absolutely essential for success at university level academic discourse competence. For full participation in whatever you study, chemistry of science, other of the sciences, math, whatever, you need particular academic discourse competences. So the idea here is you have an online intercultural exchange group that could be virtual exchange or language focused, but the idea, probably this would be more virtual exchange, you would actually help each other build a repertoire of linguistic assets that will assist you in your plurilingual development of academic discourse competence in your specific focal area, right? Using this portfolio idea, and it's a little bit underspecified because I don't know exactly what would look best. This was my question to about COIL. I'm hoping for like a better model to do this, but for the time being, this is what I put together. So you have this open plurilingual repository. This would all be open source, open education, shareable with other students, or potentially if you wanted to use it to illustrate what you could do with the language for employers or grad programs or whatever. So this is a key piece, all right? Human knowledge fundamentally mediated by specialized uses of language. No surprise there. Any of you know Anne Spard, a mathematics learning scientist, right? Thinking is a form of communication. Learning is modifying and extending one's discourse. Her big pitch is your ability to communicate about the concepts core to your field are coextensive with your understanding of the core concepts in your field. You must have the language. You must have the language. That's why Todd Rosenstiel at Portland State University, who I work with, now teaches not biology, which is his focal area. He teaches the language of biology. And he introduces himself in the course saying, I am Todd Rosenstiel, I'm a biologist, I'm here to teach you the language of biology, which is coextensive with your capacity to understand core concepts, principles, etc. Now, any of you know Jim Cummins? I'm sure that's a familiar name. At deeper levels of conceptual and academic functioning, there is considerable overlap or independence across languages. So a key piece here in virtual exchange, right, in particular, is your L1 is an asset, right? And the better you understand the L1, the better you're going to be able to understand it in your L2, L3, L4, or whatever. A stronger L1 means a stronger L2, and you need academic discourse competence to be able to do that, right? And this is, for my campus, an open access campus, first generation students. They don't have academic discourse competence necessarily coming in. They may, but not. So this is just in their L1 too, right? As well as having this plurilingual piece. So you can ask yourself a whole bunch of questions about this, right? To students, what terminology is specific to your field? What recurrent phrases or collocational patterns do you notice, right? In textbooks, research articles, lectures, other materials. What high-frequency language patterns are really relevant for whatever it is you do? Writing lab reports in biology, documenting computer code, or architectural renderings, right? Engaging in post-structuralist analysis of the public sphere. So this is just meant to be a heuristic, right? But you have, these are just simple wordles, but you would be able to glean in a variety of areas the core linguistic assets associated with the academic discourse competence necessary to fully participate in whatever it is that you're doing at the undergraduate, I would argue even the graduate level. Only 40 more minutes? No. And it doesn't have to be just, like static text. It can also be, this is the Michigan Corpus of Academic Spoken English. And you can actually look at instructional uses of key terms in classroom discourse, right? All right, so enough on like. Oh, by the way, possibly the best acronym ever. Language Integrated Knowledge Education, or like. I think that's, yeah. This should remind you, by the way, a little bit of CLIL and things like that. We're almost done, sort of. Hold on. How long do we have?
The boss is there.
Because we started late. So I will tie this up quickly, I promise. This idea of being a student and the discursive subject position of that identity, being the place where you're going to learn to utilize language in a powerful way, is not necessarily the only way that can happen, right? As Firth and Wagner described, the general preoccupation with the learner at the expense of other potentially relevant social identities is a problem in SLA, also in pedagogy and classroom contexts, etc. You remember the Hana Denoi piece, right? They appreciate online intercultural exchange, but the students stay safely within the virtual classroom, right? Bound to the subject position of student, right? And identity, as Blomart and others have described it, are fundamentally kinds of repertoires, semiotic repertoires. Student is just one of those. In some of the work that I'm exploring now, this idea of structured unpredictability, which comes from the gaming literature, situated language usage events, experience-driven, interest or passion-driven, and teacher-amplified. This is a key piece, right? Because we are in educational institutions. So I won't go over this in too much detail. Some of you may be familiar with this article. Dan Kovich and I were super interested in the Eurovision Song Contest and the Commons fields hanging off that. If you ever want to blow your mind, go hang out there. You'll throw up a little bit in your mouth, but in other ways it's very powerful and profound. So you could actually go there in international teams and check out what's happening there, figure out how to contribute, look at patterns in discourse, look at the ways in which multiple discourses are used. It's very interesting. Similarly, many of you are familiar with Shannon Sarlow's work, for example, Rebecca Black's work on fandom. There are all types of ways to engage in fan fiction in a way that would involve online intercultural exchange, right? Check out what's going on already in that domain, and then collaborate in online intercultural exchange formats. So you have teams that can produce bilingual or translations of the same story or a mixed language text. And then my idea that actually arose with a student is, after they do fan fiction, you're interested sometimes in genre reframes, right? You want them to be able to express something, but within a different expository style. So they can take an action in a fan fiction and then produce an expository newspaper or journalistic account, right? Which would be kind of interesting, right? And you'd end up with, as I say, beautiful narrative and journalistic prose. Shannon's work, I'll let you look at this. This was published in the book edited by Lourdes Ortega and Marta Gonzalez-Lloret, but it has a bunch of tasks associated with fan fiction. Many of you are familiar with online gaming environments. I'm coming very close to the end. Dota, Defense of the Ancients, right? So 5 people come together from all over the world and they have to figure out how to communicate in order to kill other people. But what I love about this is you can see here a post from a gamer. This game taught me about the diversity of cultures that our little corner of the universe offers. Then it taught me to hate them all. And this was like 687 times. So just because it exists doesn't mean people are gonna get on well together. All types of interesting things happen in gaming environments. People like other self-initiated, other correction, all these things you don't normally see. Lots of work going on in gaming in general, and you can participate not just playing games, but by producing and or reading strategy websites or fan fiction associated with games. And you have this articulated universe, this semiotic universe of potential that if students care enough about, they will spend tens of hours on this. And large volumes of effortful engagement equals learning outcomes. That is an equation you can take to the bank, right? And my kids like it. So you get expressions like this, at least I do. So I'm not going to talk about that. And you can read about bridging activities if you want to do other online intercultural exchanges in the wild that involve engagements in the wild. I have a book out with Sebastian Debrel looking at social pedagogies. It just came out a few months ago. Okay, so for scaling up OIE, and this is a penultimate slide, continuing development of LMS platforms, learning management systems, tools, task databases, evaluation rubrics. This is super important. So my focus today on exogenous education environments, for the most part, is not meant to negate the power and the importance of a rising tide floating all online intercultural and virtual exchange boats, all right? On the other hand, we also should honor and learn from students' digital desire lines, right? Engagement in the wild, from Hutchins' critically important work on the ships of Navy frigate boats, by the way, very interesting. Use of vernacular tools can do a whole bunch of things. Move students from consumers of knowledge to participants and creators of knowledge, right? Interacting in high interest, high agency affinity spaces can do wonders for volume of effortful engagement. Different identity positions are possible, forging interpersonal relationships of significance, et cetera, et cetera. And so explore it, think about it, and if you have questions, let me know. Thanks so much. And I'm really sorry to run over.
Anna, I would like to say that perhaps we don't really have much time for questions. So sorry to be stepping into the shoes that belong to me. I would just like to say that let's discuss things over lunch. Is that a good idea?
Count on Steve while he's eating.
Yeah. And then, Steve, thank you very much. And one little announcement that's very authoritarian on my part. I suggest we start the next session 15 minutes later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.